Hello, my name is Marie Flacassier. I'm also known as Marie, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of BeatBabel in California. We are a language service provider, and today I'm here to talk about the overview of language services and some of the key concepts we use in the industry, from globalization to localization and internationalization. So I'm sure you've all heard of globalization by now. It's an economic concept, and it is the process by which people and goods move easily across borders. It's also the process through which companies bring their ideas or products or services to the rest of the world. Globalization usually involves a cultural element, as ideas and traditions are exchanged and usually assimilated. We have very few obstacles today to slow the flow of products and services between countries. However, I'm sure you will have noticed that recent political developments worldwide have attempted to restrict the global expansions by pushing companies to become more local. That being said, I wanted to give you an example that explains some of the concepts that I'll be talking about today. And for that, I wanted to use Starbucks, because I'm sure you will go for coffee every day, or tea. Starbucks is interesting as it has coffee shops in over 75 countries worldwide. Outside the US, its biggest area of operation are Canada, China, and Japan. Starbucks is similar everywhere you go. I'm sure you like your vanilla latte or your caramel frappuccino, and that's why you go to Starbucks. But it's not the same everywhere. So if you travel, you can notice that things are different depending on where you go. And Starbucks tailors its products based on local customs and tastes. They do it by adjusting, for example, the store design or the size of the cup. In the US, our cup size are much bigger than in the rest of the world. They also adjust the amount of sugar in a drink, for example, or in their food. The menu might be very different from one country to the next, and even sometimes the imagery that they use. So I'll give you an example. I'm from France, and in France, sandwiches at Starbucks are made with brioche, which is a type of bread that we like. In Japan, you will find a lot of matcha frappuccinos. And very interestingly, in the Middle East, the Little Mermaid logo of Starbucks was considered inappropriate, and it was changed into a crown so as to not offend the people, because it was not okay to show the top of a female body. So again, in different places, you will have this adjustment being made to render something more local. Looking at globalization, what are the steps involved into making something global? So the first step is what we call internationalization. It's also known in the industry as I-18N. And 18 represents the letters between the I and the N. So internationalization means getting your product and services ready for your international expansion and for different international markets. You want to make sure your product will be easy to adapt. We usually use the term internationalization when referring to software, but also web content, strings, or an app, more and more so nowadays. Internationalization is a fundamental step in the design and development process before localization. So if you're a developer and you're trying to get your content ready for localization, you would be looking at a few different things. For example, your user interface, your buttons, your tabs, Are they large enough or adaptable for textual? Because English is a very short language, but most languages will have text expansion. You also want to look at encoding, making sure that your character encoding is set to Unicode or UTF-8 to make sure that the encoding will display correctly with Asian languages, for example. Another thing to look at is to avoid what we call hard coding, which is separating the localizable content from the source code, which will make it easier for translation down the line. So a few things that are involved when talking about internationalization and internationalization engineering. And that's, again, setting up your product to make sure it will be easy to localize. So the next step would be localization. Similarly to internationalization, we have an abbreviation for it, which is L10N. Again, there are 10 letters between the L and the N. And what does localization mean? It means adapting a product or a service for a specific market or locale. And you can do that by adapting it linguistically, technically, or culturally. You want your product to appear like it was created for that specific market. And basically, local culture is much more than just language. So the term localization was coined in the 1980s, where computer companies were developing software that they wanted to sell internationally, and they needed to adapt to different locales, hence the word localization. There are many things involved when looking at the localization process. One of the first things, of course, is translation, which I'm sure you all know, it's converting a text from one language to another. Another thing that we use is transcreation, and that's a little bit different. This is going beyond just the text, and it's adapting a message or a slogan or a tagline to make it relevant for a target market. It's often used in marketing or advertising, and it highlights in a way the translator's creative role. So it reads like it was written for that specific market. Some other things that we use in localization or we're mindful of is changing your visuals, whether it is the colors, the images that you use, maybe the choice of videos. We make sure that we have to suit the taste and cultural habits of markets, different markets. Another thing that we look into is formatting and typesetting. For example, I mentioned before being able to deal with text well. German is a much longer language than English is. So you will have to be able to adapt the text so that it looks as nice as it did in English, but it's a bit longer. You may also have to adapt your text from right to left for languages such as Arabic, or adapt the line spacing for languages that use different character sets, such as Japanese or Chinese. So a lot of things to consider when making a brochure or marketing collateral or a user manual. Another thing that we pay attention to in localization is adapting numbers, date, and time formats. For example, today is the 9th of May, and in English we would write it 05-09. Well, in Europe, most people would read that as September 5th because we reverse the way we put the day and the month. So something that's easy for us to read in the US could be completely misinterpreted in Europe, for example. So again, paying attention to numbers is very important. In a similar way, we want to pay attention to converting measurements and currencies. In the US, we use the imperial system. In the rest of the world, pretty much, they use the metric system. So if you're translating a manual or localizing a video, a cooking video, you will want to convert all the measurements used to make it relevant for whoever your target audience is. Another thing to consider when looking at localization is regulations and legal requirements. For example, the use of GDPR for personal data is very restrictive when it comes to European citizens. In the US, we have more lenient rules when it comes to data. And there are many examples of local regulations that need to be respected in order for your product to go live in different parts of the world. Another concept that we've been talking about a lot in the industry for the last 10 years is what we call post-editing. It's also known as MTPE, or machine translation post-editing. So basically, English content is processed by a machine translation engine, and the translated result is reviewed by a linguist and edited to increase the quality. Post-editing allows larger volumes of content to be translated faster, and it's often used when either the content is urgent or there's a high volume that might otherwise take very long to translate. So that's another concept that we have seen and that we use in the day-to-day environment, depending on what the client requirements are for their products. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you very much.